Thank you so very much, Dr. Kelly, for all you do. And thanks again to Dr. Stephen Morey for leading the charge on the most recent panel discussion. I'd like to thank all of our esteemed panelists today and to the Florida A&M University team, especially Dr. Kelly, Dr. Abazinga, Dr. Pitter, also to Michael Simmons, to Ms. Cynthia Henry, to Stephen Bonda, and to the entire FAMU team, Director of Communications Keith Miles and Andrew Scarrett, and of course to all of the students. They have been ablaze in the chat box today with kudos galore on all of the panel discussions and sessions and all that they have gleaned from our expert panelists. And of course, to our host, Dr. Larry Robinson. I am Carmen Cummings, a proud graduate of the FAMU School of Journalism. I'm a former television news anchor and senior investigative reporter. And as I sometimes say, thankfully, nothing to probe today, only grateful and humbled to help serve in the capacity to help navigate your afternoon and support the mission of nurturing future leaders in STEM. And at this time, we are going to transition into the Student Professional Development Workshop. And here again is a familiar face, our very own Rattler, Dr. Natasha White, for the introduction of the keynote speaker.
Thanks again, Carmen, for that introduction. It is my pleasure to introduce you to our Student Professional Development Workshop leader, Dr. Dionne Hoskins Brown. Dr. Hoskins Brown is a scientist and educator who works for NOAA's Fisheries Service and is a scientist on loan to Savannah State University. Dr. Hoskins Brown understands that the key to addressing our most pressing coastal issues relies on having a spectrum of stakeholders and a diverse talent pool who can work together to generate the scientific information we need to make sound decisions. She believes in scholarship, mentorship, and service. Her long-term research on fish habitat and passion for coastal African-American history has created a new research path for examining the potential impact of sea level rise on Gullah Geechee communities. Using predictive models of tidal inundation and maps of historic communities, she and her students are working to create impact scenarios that can assist the Gullah Geechee Cultural Heritage Corridor with their advocacy and management. Dr. Hoskins Brown holds a Bachelor of Science degree in marine biology from Savannah State University and a Doctor of Philosophy degree in marine sciences from the University of South Carolina. Without further ado, Dr. Hoskins Brown.
Thank you so much, Natasha. I appreciate your generous introduction. And I'm happy to be on this meeting with 157 people who understand the value of the Educational Partnership Program that is provided by NOAA's Office of Education. I appreciate the invitation to be able to provide some guidance for students. And I'm also painfully aware that I am the very last talk in a very long day. So it's my goal to be engaging and to provide some information that I believe will be helpful. So with that, I'm going to share my screen. All right, here we go. Pardon me. So this workshop is focused on how to get the NOAA mentor that you need and how to retain the mentor and the mentoring relationship. You've probably had a lot of discussion and heard NOAA scientists talk about their interest and their willingness to provide guidance for students, and you've probably heard people give testimony about the value of those relationships. But I want to take a step back and talk about how do we build those relationships. So usually when we're talking about mentorship, we are focusing on testimonials of individuals like I just mentioned, those who talk about how having a mentor has fostered growth and success in their career, and mentors who talked about seeing that growth in a mentee. But knowing how to get a mentor is a really important skill. It's easy to find a mentor. When students come to me or students talk with me about their interests, I tell them, go to NOAA.gov. You can find individuals who are doing work across the country at the different science centers and regional offices, at headquarters, you can find the NOAA personnel who are doing what you want to do. And many NOAA personnel really enjoy the satisfaction that comes from mentoring students. So there are many folks who are already predisposed to say yes, or at least maybe, when you contact them. And you'll see this list of requirements for the LMR CSC. They are, pretty much like the requirements at all of the cooperative science centers. And what I have in bold and in large letters is that one piece that's really important. That is the basis of this workshop, and that is everyone has to have a NOAA mentor. You need a NOAA mentor as part of your student development plan. And so how exactly do you make that happen in the most productive way? So let's think about the mentoring roles. So there are the traditional roles that we're used to: a NOAA scientist who's hosting a student for an internship, a NOAA scientist who's hosting a graduate student for a NERDO, or who's mentoring a postdoc, or maybe a NOAA scientist who's serving on a committee as a committee member. But there are also more informal, infrequent roles that are just as valuable, like just being a professional mentor, being a NOAA professional that you can contact and ask, hey, I'm having some trouble in USA jobs. Where can I find a resource to help me? Or how do I decide what kind of NOAA career I'm interested in? There are several positions that I find attractive, and they go in different directions. The same thing may occur with if you apply for a canals and you're in the process of deciding, okay, what direction do I want to go in? Having someone that you can talk to who's familiar with the agency and who's familiar with your skills is very valuable. And those have increasing levels of time commitment on your part and the part of the mentor. So here's the problem. How do you make the connection that fosters the commitment that you're looking for? So I have 20 years of experience that I'm going to throw in on this conversation, but I also did a survey of some NOAA scientists just 2 weeks ago to get some fresh information that can be shared with you. And all of the information that I got, all of the guidance and advice based on their experience working with students and working with EPP students, yielded 3 main categories of things to do. So let's start before the contact even happens. Be resume and virtually ready. If any of the students are present, and I hope they are, from the Living Marine Resources Cooperative Science Center, they heard this advice from Natalie Huff from the office of the EEO office on yesterday at the LINK conference offered by the Northeast Fisheries Science Center. Be resume and virtually ready. That means have your resume polished, have it looked over by a friend, a colleague, or an advisor, have your grades in order, and refine your initial email. For example, by all means, use Grammarly. Be thoughtful about how you've put it together. Have completed an inventory of your preparation and your coursework. And so as you're talking to an individual about what you're interested in, they may ask, well, have you taken this course or another course that would prepare you for the work that you would be doing with them? The other thing that's valuable to do is if you can obtain a recommendation from a trusted NOAA colleague, or get an e-introduction from one NOAA colleague to another, that does a lot to help, frame the conversation that you're going to have with that individual. Take stock of what you have to offer. What is your diversity of experiences? What is the diversity of your coursework? How do your higher level electives contribute to what you're able to bring to the topic? What is your preparation, previous internships, progress that you've made on a thesis or dissertation? And then finally, very important, NOAA has many public-facing documents that can give you a lot of information about the work that you were trying to do. These are stock assessments, strategic plans, annual guidance documents, all associated with the different line offices in which the agency has laid out what its priorities are. So don't make your first contact an educational exercise for you where you're expecting that individual to tell you everything you need to know about what NOAA is doing. try to be as informed and abreast of what's happening in the area that you are interested in as you can, so that you can advance the conversation when you make that contact. So now you make the contact. I have a general rule of thumb, and this is aligned with the kind of time commitment that is associated with being something as simple as a professional mentor to being someone who's gonna serve on your committee. The greater time commitment that you're looking for from your NOAA mentor, the earlier you need to reach out and start building that relationship. And that means be timely. Don't wait until it's April before the summer that you need to find a required internship, or before you need to do your NERDO, to start looking around for folks who can help shape your work. That is something that you should be thinking of as soon as you become an EPP student, as soon as you get an EPP scholarship, as soon as you are a CSC student, fellow, intern. You should be looking around to see, okay, who in NOAA is doing what I want to do, or has the tools to be able to ask the questions that I want to be able to ask. Next, give a good interview. And the interview isn't the same as it used to be. It's not even the same as it was prior to the pandemic. Your interview starts with the resume that you attach to your email when you introduce that person. Your interview is part of the email, the language you use, how succinct you are in how you're communicating with that person, or what you say or how you approach someone in GChat. A lot of NOAA professionals use GChat a lot. How do you show up in that virtual meeting? You know, what are all of the things that contribute to the first impression that that person's going to be getting for you, that they're going to call that interview? And I thought that was a really interesting concept, because the scientists who suggested give a good interview really talked about the ways that they saw all of those interactions as being part of the interview. And of course, there is that potential for a phone call that folds into that process. Be upbeat, be brief, and be to the point. Now, there are folks who want to know all of the background behind your thesis proposal research, or the justification behind your dissertation, or why you got interested in marine science. Some people want to know that background information, but not everybody wants to know it in the first email. So an introductory email that's the long tome, long essay of all kinds of information, sometimes makes it difficult for that person to know, what do you need? When do you need it? How can I help? So in your initial communication, be upbeat, be brief, and be to the point. Show passion and curiosity and the desire to learn. And that's important throughout your process, not just the initial communication. Now, communication. This is what I mean about being upbeat, being brief, and to the point. Be very specific about what you need and when you need it. If you need a NERDO in 2 months, then go on and communicate that. If you're looking for someone to participate as part of your committee, and you're looking to write your proposal by the end of the semester or the beginning of the next semester, then convey that. But be very clear about what it is you need and what kind of timeline that you're working on. It's great if you're not on an abbreviated timeline, but if you are, go on and convey that. And also convey what you bring to the table. What is it that you bring to the branch or the unit or the office or the division, wherever it is that individual is situated? What is it that you bring to their team that in exchange for what they will be offering to you, you'll be able to enhance what they're doing? And be very, very clear about that. If you're very good at SQL or R, say that. If you already know, if you've already taken GIS, say that. If you're terrific at taxonomy, that's fine. If you haven't had those skills, but maybe you have some other strong soft skills, like you're highly communicative, you work well in a team, you enjoy field work, convey whatever it is that you have that is a strength, even if it might not be what other people bring. The other thing is that you shouldn't assume that the message has been received. So as you're communicating very clearly about what it is that you are looking for, what it is you need, what timeline you're working on, make sure before you leave that email exchange or that initial conversation that there's an understanding of why you reached out and what you're looking for, so that they are properly considering and receiving what you've put out there. So now, one of the things that I didn't mention in a previous slide, but that I did want to communicate is that, you know, a lot of professionals love the idea of supporting and encouraging new talent. I mean, that's the reason for this whole conference that we're at now, is really supporting and growing talent. And that is definitely a part of something that NOAA professionals like to do. But here's a really important thing that I see that sometimes students miss, junior students miss in their interactions with NOAA personnel. And that is, like, unlike universities, most NOAA offices do not have education as a primary mission. It's a complementary mission. It complements the work that they are already doing, but it's not a central piece of it. Of course, there are offices where that's true. The Sea Grant Office, the Office of Education. There are offices for which that is true, but for the most part, it is something that people add on to their professional duties because of their personal commitment, because of the virtue of mentoring, and because they've been engaged and encouraged and stimulated by a student who's reached out to them. So for that reason, positive professional interactions are really important to a successful mentoring relationship. So once you get that going, the next step is, how do you keep them? How do you keep that mentor? So I have this photograph of one of my former students, First Lieutenant Chelsea Parrish. She's in the NOAA Corps. I'm very proud of her. She just got selected for flight school. She is an LMR CSC master's graduate, and she maintains contact, and she puts a lot of energy into it. And one of the things that she did recently that I thought was really effective was that in her place, having gone to an HBCU, it was really important to her to assist NOAA Corps with their recruiting efforts, because there had been conversations that they weren't experiencing the success that they wanted to experience in the HBCU environment. And when they started saying the schools that they were recruiting at, she thought, well, those are not the schools who are generating the degrees that you're looking for. And so she said, I need to help with this issue. I don't exactly know how to do it. And she reached out to me and she said, okay, how do I have this conversation? She did an analysis of all HBCUs. She looked at the degrees and top graduates, and she put together a recruitment presentation that she sent me for us to collaborate on. And it was extremely helpful for her in the environment and the leadership that she was sharing it with. But it's part of what reinforces our mentor-mentee relationship is not just that she's a nice person, not just that when she stops by, when she's in Savannah, she'll try to reach out and contact me. It's not just that she keeps me aware of what's going on in her life, like getting into flight school or reaching back to get other LMR CSC students on the Oregon 2 and involved in the work that she's doing, but it's because she was conspiring to do good. She's trying to do good, and she reached out for some partnership. There are lots of other ways to maintain a mentoring relationship, but I thought that one was kind of unique and that I would share it. So here's the thing about mentors, pardon me. They are motivated when they feel like their time is well spent. It's not a secret that the NOAA workforce has shrunk in the past decades, and that means many people are doing more work than they were doing before. So in that case, that means that taking on a project is another thing in the things that they need to do that is not a primary mission task, but a complementary mission task. it's really important to meet your mentor halfway in all parts of the relationship and all parts of the work. This doesn't mean that everything is going to go perfectly. It does mean that they are part of the process where they are witnessing your growth as a professional, and they're seeing opportunities for improvement in the work that they're doing because they're able to see things through your eyes. Mentors understand that the demands of a degree program are great, particularly now in a quarantine environment. They understand the value of work-life balance. So fewer likely demand an all or nothing commitment where if I'm not getting everything from you all the time, then I'm not going to participate in this activity. But it's important that your work with your mentor and your time commitment honor the opportunity that you're being provided. And I'm not saying that to say that this is not what our students are doing. We have extraordinary students that are associated with the Educational Partnership Program. I have witnessed it over 20 years. So I am not saying this to say that it's not true. I am simply reminding us that in the cases sometimes when we are not being our best selves, that impacts our mentoring relationship. And so it's important to put in the work, put in the time, be intrinsically motivated. But you know what? If you hit a challenge, if you hit a wall, don't ghost us because your workload has overwhelmed you. Don't ghost us because it's homecoming and you don't want to respond at this time. Don't ghost us because your proposal defense is going to be soon and you're focusing on that. Communicate. We have challenges that we face as well. Mentors get sick, mentors experience loss, mentors experience overwhelm, and they make mistakes. More than one mentor mentioned to me the idea of motivation. So let's say we're all humans in this mentoring relationship. And sometimes the same processes that affect your productivity, that affect your contribution, affect the mentors. Be compassionate. Like I said, we get sick, we have loss, we experience overwhelm, we make mistakes. And if you have intrinsic motivation, you have the ability to move on and proceed in that period and not be driven only by positive reinforcement. I will share with you that I had a conversation with a student not too long ago, and they were being challenged by the quarantine environment. Everything's virtual. And for students who are extrinsically motivated, that's kind of a challenge because they're used to that positive feedback, going back and forth between individuals, and that reinforcement doesn't feel or the same way or have the same impact in this virtual environment. And I was noticing in some interactions, not just with this student, but with someone else, that it was difficult for them to be motivated, even though they typically were intrinsically motivated. And part of it was because this person had a bit of an addiction to the positive reinforcement. They were used to the positive success, the encouragement, and that's kind of lacking in this pandemic environment. So I just want to acknowledge that at this time, when we're sheltering and we're seeing each other with virtual backgrounds, that those things exist, that they're important, and it's all the more reason that we have to be communicative one with another. So another word that came up when I was talking to these senior scientists was to be attractive. And I thought, oh man, that is such a strange term to be using in a D&I space. But of course, they qualified that what they meant was that when you're reaching out to be part of a team or to engage a mentor, that it's important to be an attractive team member, someone that they want to bring on board, someone that they want to engage. And that is part of what is fed by the first impression. but it's also fed by the ability to communicate and convey what you bring to the table. The other thing that is a part of being attractive is being prepared and reliant, having overall soft skills. So let's just look at this figure in general. I've mentioned being a team player and having someone that is attractive to join the team, the division, the unit, the office that you may be trying to connect to, and having communication skills. But these other skills that I'm sure you've seen in other settings are equally important. Being confident, showing leadership, being accountable when you've made a mistake or when you are wrong, hitting a problem and trying to solve it. You may not succeed in solving it, but taking the initiative and trying to solve it. Managing your time and being resilient. You get sick, things happen, you get overwhelmed. But being able to practice these different skills in this figure help keep a mentoring relationship alive. So here's another thought that I don't know if folks have been thinking about in mentoring relationships in as much as they've been thinking about them in our overall society. And that is that it's of value to have a D&I mindset to your mentoring relationship. Years ago, there was this heavy emphasis on mentors being present that reflected the diversity of students that we were trying to bring into the agency, into STEM in general in our nation. And that was a big deal. I think that where we are now in our diversity and inclusion is understanding that we can benefit from similarities and differences in our mentoring and professional relationships. And so take that into your interaction with your mentors, that, okay, some of these differences are not just differences that convey they're not going to understand me. And it is true, they may not understand you. This is why it's important to be able to communicate. But some of those differences will be extraordinarily helpful. Some of the similarities will help you bond in such a way so that when there are difficult periods, there is that part of the relationship that has authenticity and genuineness to it. I had a friend who was frustrated last semester about a student who wasn't inclusive on a project in the way that they should have been. And in the case of this student, the student was doing a new project and it was built upon all the projects that had been done in the lab prior to then. And the student didn't include that as any of the introduction to why they were pursuing their project and why they were pursuing it in a particular way. And there was one of my friends who saw this happening and was extremely offended by it because she saw it as a discourtesy to all the people who had contributed to the cumulative question. And there are lots of opportunities for us to miss the mark on courtesy. But I encourage you, where you have the opportunity, try to practice courtesy, try to practice compassion, try to be thoughtful and inclusive. It is really, really difficult to heal relationships when people think that they have not been treated respectfully in the workplace. And this is in terms of their effort and also their time and their humanity and their contributions. So now here's the hardest part, and this is why I saved it for just about the end. You have to be able to have hard conversations. And you cannot have hard conversations unless you are emotionally intelligent. You have to be able to sit in a situation and be aware of your emotions, be aware of the situation, and manage it with restraint and intelligence. And if you're able to build emotional intelligence, even in a challenging situation, even when you've been wronged or been mistreated or something unfair has occurred, it will help you have and survive and benefit from a hard conversation. Sometimes The hard conversation will be about you. It'll be about your performance. It'll be about expectations that were not met. Sometimes the conversation needs to be about the mentor, where they haven't been thoughtful, they haven't been courteous, they haven't been compassionate. But if you can have the conversation, generate the emotional intelligence and also the courage, because it takes a lot of professional courage, because mentoring relationships do not have even distributions of power. The power is weighted with the mentor. So having the ability to sit down and have the courage to have that conversation, survive it, not leave so bruised, so damaged, so offended, so angry, so disappointed, so discouraged that you can't come back to that relationship. That's an important skill, because if you can survive it, you can take some time and you can come back to what is the benefit of this conversation. It could be that, you know what, I chose the wrong mentor and this is not a mentor for me. That could be part of the hard conversation. It could be learning that about that. Or it could be something about skills that need to be developed or courtesies that have not been extended. Lastly, you have to be willing to hear and respond to constructive criticism. I should have put constructive there, because if you Google criticism, some people say, oh, criticism is not helpful, you need feedback. I say constructive criticism is feedback. Getting that criticism, even when it may be pointed, even when you don't appreciate it, still may be extremely helpful for you. And criticism does not equal disinvestment. Just because someone has conveyed that they're not happy with where the team is in a project, or they're not happy with your contribution at that time, or the quality of the work, or the time that you're committing, or anything, whatever that feedback may be, just because you're getting that feedback doesn't mean that a mentor is going to throw you in the trash. They may, but more than likely, they are conveying their feelings about where they are in the relationship, and they're trying to give feedback. They're trying to communicate. And I don't know how it is for all mentors, because everyone brings their unique experience to the mentoring experience. But I know for me, I don't spend a lot of time being critical and having hard conversations over and over about students I don't care about. Very few students that I don't care about. But if a student is dismissive and they're not in the mentoring relationship and they don't want to hear what I have to say, I'm not going to spend that time investing. So having a hard conversation, it's just as hard for the mentor as it is for you. It takes a lot of emotional energy. It takes a lot of thought and restraint. If they're having the conversation, more than likely, then they care. And that's important to know. And that should empower you to be able to benefit. But you know, it is hard. Ask anyone who's received some really bad reviews on a manuscript and a journal has said, no, we're not accepting this. Don't even send it back with revisions. When you get that kind of email or that kind of letter, sometimes you just gotta put that down for about 2 weeks. You can't even really digest what those comments are from the reviewers, because you feel some kind of way about that manuscript. You wrote it the way that you thought it should have been written. And so getting that feedback smart, it kind of hurts. So everyone can't just process and bounce back. That's part of your survival. Part of your survival approach is figuring out a way to get to the information, to get to the lesson that you need. Now, I already said to you, you are the cream of the crop. You are an EPP student because you are the cream of the crop. And the mentoring relationship is just one part of your professional development. All of these things that you're doing to be that next level of scientist, it's just this one piece of it. And think about it this way. Think about if you take some of these principles, some of them, how many of your other relationships, professional relationships, personal relationships, can be enhanced by following some of these recommendations. So here's the other thing. You're not out there by yourself trying to identify mentors. So this is a pilot that has been developed for the LMRCSC, but I'll be developing it for across NOAA. There is an engagement survey where we are asking within NOAA, asking other NOAA professionals, hey, would you like to work with a student? How would you like to work with a student? And so this survey was distributed this spring. We've gotten some responses to it in the Southeast. Again, we're going to expand it and make it for other areas. But here's what we're asking NOAA personnel. Let us know how you have engaged with students in the past. You haven't worked with one. This one is the LMRCSC survey, as I said, so we'll be making it for broader use. I've worked with the EPP student. I've worked with a student in one of the other programs, or I've worked with one, but it was a long time ago. And then here, this is the important box that I'm really interested in. What level of engagement are you interested in with the student? So if they say, hey, unstructured professional mentor, they can call on me when they need something. I don't necessarily need to be on a committee, or I will host a project. I'll work on a proposal. I'll be on a committee, or hey, I'll contact them and they can go out on surveys or do some observing with me. This kind of information is going to form a database that when students are looking for mentors, because the other part of this survey I've not shown you has keywords and topics. What's your area of specialties? Where are you physically located? What's your unit? So when students are looking for mentors, we already have a list of people who have already raised their hand and say, hey, I'm interested. So we'll be developing that and getting that out probably in the next month or so to have that list for everyone. Now understand, folks who are at this conference have, by their association, signed up to be especially friendly for you and to be a resource. So pay attention to the names that appear in the participant list. Pay attention to who those folks are, because many of them are making themselves available to you as well. I hope this has been helpful. I believe we have some time for questions. Thank you and good luck in your work. I'm going to stop sharing. Oh, thank you, Josette. I appreciate that. Let's see. All right. Got new messages. There was one person who really valued the last slide. Yeah, that's why I made it the last slide. Oh, how nice is Michelle? Michelle is a super mentor, and I want you to know, Michelle, I saved you because I sure did have a picture of you and Jeff Isley in this talk. Diana and Daniel and Senna, thank you. I'm glad that this was helpful. Are there any questions? I feel like this talk will be made available to you via the conference. And I'm also happy to return to you 21 minutes of your day. I realize you've been on all day long. So Natasha told me to tell you a few things. One is that definitely come back. Exactly what Dr. Kelly said. Come back, and tomorrow there's a plethora of really terrific talks, more valuable information, terrific connections that can be made. So definitely check back in tomorrow and get all that you can out of this terrific platform for your growth. And if we can be supportive, let me know. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Dr. Schott. So this is an interesting comment. Wasn't sure if a mentor mentee should have a hard conversation or how to have them. Absolutely. One of the things that I try to convey to even young people, I used to volunteer in a high school, and I used to see all kinds of crazy things jump off in that high school, even before 9 o'clock when kids were just checking in. And I was volunteering because I kept sending information for internships to this school, and I wasn't getting any response. And I understood by volunteering there that it was because everything was on fire every day. Like there wasn't any place for enhancement because nobody was able to get those opportunities to the students. It was just too much chaos. But the chaos that I noticed, and I volunteered as the secretary at the front desk, so I saw everything come in. The chaos that I noticed was that young people didn't know how to communicate conflict. They didn't know how to say, I don't like the way you said that to me. It may be true, but I didn't like that. Or I don't feel comfortable talking to you right now. Or I'm angry and I can't talk right now. And as I have looked into different situations with master's students and their committees, undergraduates in their classes, mentee-mentor relationships that have gone wrong, it has always gotten down to people not being able to respectfully communicate their feelings. It may take you some time talking to a friend. You may need to dictate it into OneNote on your phone to see what it looks like, get your thoughts out and process them. But certainly, if you can communicate, then you can have these hard conversations and people will respect you even if they don't agree with you. Not saying are there any other comments come up? Absolutely, you can disagree without being disagreeable. And I think it's Tiami. I hope that's correct. If not, you're very welcome. Well, ladies and gentlemen, all participants, I'm happy to have been here with you for your last workshop of the day. I can be reached at Dionne.Hoskins-Brown@NOAA.gov. Thanks.